Good morning. My name is Carolyn Furman, and I'm a historian here at the Edison Ford Winter Estates. And today I'm going to be doing a digital discussion on a topic that is very important to me. It's important because I don't believe there's enough history spoken about it, or that there's enough written about it. And I found this topic and said, this is what I'm going to talk about. This is what I'm going to research. So today I'm actually going to give you some of the things that I found, and it's all about the women soldiers of the Civil War. Really want to start right off with a quote by Mary Livermore of the U.S. Sanitary Commission. She wrote that the number of women soldiers known to service is a little less than 400. I cannot vouch for the correctness of this estimate, but I am convinced that a larger number of women disguised themselves and enlisted in the service for one cause or another than was dreamed of. Mary Livermore was actually talking about the Union soldiers. We do know today, after much research, that there is approximately somewhere between 400 and 1,000 women, both on the Union side and the Confederate side, that actually enlisted and was recruited into the Civil War and went in as soldiers. And today what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually ask 6 questions, and I'm going to answer those 6 questions through profiling. I'm going to profile 4 Union women, and I'm also going to profile 4 Confederate women. And what I'm hoping is that you can see the similarities, you can see the differences. In addition to that, I'm hoping that the whispers from these women actually come through, and you'll see the immense reasons that they actually did this, in addition to what they actually contributed to history. My first question is, who are they? Where did they come from? Many different answers to each question. Why did they become soldiers? How did they get onto the battlefield? The answers are collective as well as individual. And what did they do and where did they end up? They are all defined as the nature of time and the resilience of the women we call the women soldiers of the Civil War. Who are they? Well, they are the uncommon revolutionaries. They refuse to stay in this socially acceptable place. Americans and immigrants, they were Northerners, they were Southerners. They were from different backgrounds, different stations in life. They were various individuals. I found they were educated, uneducated. They were introverts, they were extroverts. They were also daughters and sisters and wives and mothers, lovers. They were single, married, divorced, young, and old. Where'd they come from? They came from all over the U.S. They came from the North Union states. They came from the South Confederate states. They were from farms. They were from industrialized cities. They were from Maine, Michigan, Illinois, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, New York, Rhode Island, Michigan. On the South, they were from Virginia, Louisiana, Kentucky, Mississippi, North Carolina, Alabama, and they also came from multiple countries, Canada, Ireland, Cuba. Now, the areas that I'm talking about today are the ones that came up in my research, and there could be even more states and more countries that are a part of it. But these are the ones that came up in my research. They came from many different walks of life. They came from skilled labor from the farms. They knew how to handle horses. They were domestics. They were cooks. They were laundresses. They were farm helpers, and they were housekeepers. Why did they become soldiers? They had reasons were many, but they were also reasons just like their counterparts. They wanted to go in for the loved ones, the family members, a sense of adventure, patriotism. Some of them had a passion to make a difference, and some of them saw war as a romantic experience. Some of them escaped arranged marriages, abusive homes. They went in due to revenge, abandonment, oppression, economics. There was one reason for each soldier: freedom, independence, bounties, freedom of oppressive societal restrictions of Victorian era, social privilege, they alleviated some of the family pressure, and true independence with male personification. How'd they get on the battlefield? Many different ways, but above everything else, they used their own creativity. They created their own clothes. They added bulk and padding where they needed to make themselves look more like men. They bound their breasts. They cut their hair short. They wore caps very low on their head. Now, back in the 1860s, it's not like when you recruit today. There were no physicals, no IDs, no fingerprints, no photos. Pretty much when someone wanted to recruit, a handshake and the question, "And what is your occupation?" was the norm. That way they knew exactly where to place people. They lowered their voices. A lot of the men that were recruiting into the Civil War were young men, so their voices hadn't really matured. So the women could lower their voices. They developed a masculine gait. They smoked cigars. They practiced a firm handshake, but they found it very easy to lie. What roles did they play? Multiple roles. They were soldiers, nurses, laundresses, spies, artillery, but above every color bearers, cavalry, but above all else, these women, they were soldiers. Where are they now? Many survived. Many returned home. Many were injured. Many relocated to new places. Many died, and some we have no knowledge of. So the first set of Union people I'm going to be talking about, some of them are very well documented, and I found them to be extremely interesting. So the first one I'd like to talk to you about is Sarah Emmon Edmonds. Her quote is, "Had I been represented myself to be, I should have gone to the hospital. But being a woman, I felt compelled to suffer in silence. In order to escape detection of my sex, I would rather have been shot dead than to have been known to be a woman and sent away from the army." This picture up in the top left-hand corner is Sarah Emma prior to the Civil War. She was born December 1841 in New Brunswick, Canada. Characteristics of her: she was naturally adventurous, she was ambitious, she was a romantic, she was an ardent unionist. She was a very small lady, and initially she was rejected, but she actually took a mole off of her cheek to aid in her disguise. Then she was actually quoted as saying, "The privations and the danger of life in the army were thrilling and stoked her spirit of adventure." She had several reasons for enlistment, but her main one was she escaped a forced arranged marriage and an abusive father. She also had a personal conviction to the Union cause and a sense of duty to her adopted country. Prior to the Civil War, Sarah, about a year before that, escaped her family. She changed her last name to Edmonds, and after 1 year of fearing discovery, she decided to immigrate to the U.S. But she also knew she needed to work, so she took a job as a traveling Bible salesman, and she found that she was very good at it. So at the start of the war, Sarah was living and working in Flint, Michigan. And this is a picture of Sarah as AKA Franklin Thompson. She actually enlisted in 1861 as Franklin Thompson in Company F, 2nd Michigan Infantry, as a 3-year recruit. She covered the retreat in the First Battle of Manassas. 1862, she took on different positions. She was a mail carrier. She was a hospital attendant for Malvern Hill, and she was a courier in the Battle of 2nd Manassas. This is important to note because here her horse was killed and she had ended up with a broken leg. That did play a part in the post-war pension. Now, 1862 saw Antietam, and Antietam is known as the single bloodiest day of the Civil War with over 30,000 casualties. On the left, you're going to notice a picture. That is a picture of Antietam. And under that picture, the caption read that there was at least 4 women. We know today through documentation that there was at least 8 women that were fighting at Antietam. Did they all meet each other? There's no documentation of that. But there was at least 8 women. 1863, she became an orderly and a message relay runner for Colonel Poe. She contracted malaria. She requested a leave to go home, and she was denied. So she was fearing discovery. She left her comrades and was charged with desertion. She really didn't desert, though. From 1863 to 1865, she went back to her female personification, and she became a nurse in the United States Sanitary Commission. 1865, she actually wrote a book called Nurse and Spy in the Union Army, and she donated the profits of the book to both soldiers and other groups. After the war, she went back to Canada, and she married Linus Seeley. They had 3 children, and then they came back down to the United States. 1876, she attended a reunion, which they had several of, and she saw her comrades, was warmly received. They helped her to get the charge of desertion expunged. They also helped her to support in her application for her pension. 1884, she was cleared of desertion and awarded the government pension. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see there's the HR Bill 5335, which allowed her to get the pension. And in 1897, Sarah was admitted into the Grand Army of the Republic. The next one I'm going to actually profile for you is another Sarah. Her name is Sarah Rosetta Wakeman. She was Union. We found that she wrote several letters, and what I would like to share with you is a couple of quotes. The first one is June 5th, 1863, a letter she wrote to her father. I can tell you what made me leave home. It was because I had got tired of staying in that neighborhood. I knew that I could help you more to leave home than to stay there with you. So I left. I am not sorry that I left you. Then later on in the year, she wrote a letter to her mother, December 9th, 1863. I send you a silver ring in this letter. I hope that you get it. The ring cost me 75 cents. Top left-hand side is the only picture that we do have in full uniform of Sarah Rosetta Wakeman. She was born January 16th, 1843 in Bainbridge, New York. And she was 5 feet tall, fair-skinned, brown hair, blue eyes. She was a family of 8 children, and she did have some formal education. Her family had very serious financial difficulties. And at the time when she was growing up, she was a domestic. But prior to enlistment, she was like Sarah. She made a decision about a year before the Civil War, before the enlistment. She decided to take on the male gender in order to secure more money. She left home. She took a position as a boatman on the Shenandoah Canal. Her dream was to own a farm in Wisconsin, and she lied to enlist. The papers on the left is her voluntary enlistment papers. The next letter we have is to her dad, March 29th of 63. And she's talking about her pay. She's saying that she expects to get 4 months' pay this week. And if I do, I shall have $60 of money. I'm getting $13 per month. I will send part of it home to you. She also then says that she does not want anybody to worry about her. She feels that her God will spare her life to come home once more. She also says, when I get out of the service, I will make enough money to pay all the debts that you owe. I will have my likeness taken again and send it to you all, which she did. And this is the likeness that she sent. And the last part is she said to her family, I don't fear the rebel bullets, nor do I fear the cannon. Sarah had many reasons for enlistment: economic opportunities, social privileges, otherwise unattainable. There was evidence that showed that there was a family altercation and she did not feel safe in her neighborhood. In her letters, she spoke of equal pay for equal danger and the independence she felt in uniform. She was offered a $152 bounty to join while at the Shenango Canal. That was a very big incentive for her. She enlisted as Private Lyons Wakeman, 153rd New York Infantry, and she went in as a guard. And for the first 2 years, she was a guard at Capitol Hill. 1864, the map up in the left-hand corner shows the Red River Campaign in Louisiana. There was also other women there at the same time. She contracted an illness there, but she went on to the Battle of Pleasant Hill and Battle of Monet's Bluff. For her post-Civil War, there was a house that her descendants lived in, and they found an attic. Up in the attic, they found some letters, and the letters were investigated and verified that they were Sarah Rosetta Wakeman's letters, and they were published by the descendant. To the left is An Uncommon Soldier. That is the name of the book that they put together. The next letter you see actually came from the Swan Galleries, and she knew a gentleman by the name of William Henry Austin. She knew him from New York. He was a sergeant in another regiment, and he was with his regiment, and he met Sarah, and he wrote a letter home when he was surprised to see her in a chance meeting in Alexandria. And when he wrote the letter home, he said, "When I was going to the depot in Alexandria, I stopped at the Soldier Rest. Who should I meet there but Rosetta Wakeman? Her regiment was stopping there. At that time, we're en route for Texas. She was looking fine. She sports an insipid mustache, highly colored, presents quite a soldier's appearance. There is something mighty queer about this arrangement. Hardly think she will ever get back to New York again." And that was the letter he sent home to his family. My next one is about Katie Burnell. Katie Burnell is a little bit different than my first two soldiers. Her quote was really about her. At the Battle of New Bern, when her husband was wounded and dropped the colors, she bravely gathered them up and she carried them into battle. She was afterwards wounded and honorably discharged. Katie went into the military as Katie. There's a picture of her going into the military, but that is exactly what she looked like. She went in as herself. She was born December 1842 in Kafria, Africa. She was born into a military family in a battlefield tent. Father was a British Army colonel. Her mother passed soon after her birth. So her father had a family by the name of Mackenzie take her. They immigrated to Rhode Island. She was 5 feet tall, dark complexion, dark hair, blue eyes. 1860, she became a weaver and fell in love with Robert B. Burnell from Central Falls, Rhode Island. She actually served under fire in 2 different units. She was known for her willingness to go onto the battlefield. She was accustomed to arms. Though she did not carry a rifle, she carried a lightsaber and a revolver. She was also known as the most expert sharpshooter in the regiment. Katie dressed in her own uniform. She had a light-colored blouse, trousers, sash, boots, and a knee-length dark-colored shirt. She also had a very steady, hard attitude and never asked any special favors of anyone. The picture on the left shows her in her uniform and her husband in his uniform. She had really one reason to enlist. She was attempting to follow her husband into the war. They joined the 1st Regiment Rhode Island Volunteer, but at the time, Colonel Ambrose Burnside became an obstacle and tried to stop it. She enlisted Governor William Sprague in her quest, and she became the color bearer for the 1st Rhode Island. From that moment on, she was accepted by everyone as a bona fide soldier. The newspaper article on the left actually talks about some of her accounts that she was telling the newspaper reporter. She enlisted with her husband, 1861, for 3 months. They were at the Battle of Bull Run, where she joined the retreat and the rout of the soldiers back to Washington, was wounded in her leg. They mustered out in August of 1861, but very quickly, late 1861, they both re-enlisted in the 5th Rhode Island Infantry Heavy Artillery. She was at the Battle of New Bern in North Carolina, where she did carry the colors and she did field nursing. They mustered out together 1862 of November. She did receive official discharge papers, and according to the Small State Big History, only woman to ever be given formal documentation by the Union Army. They moved to Bridgeport, Connecticut. She was accepted into the Grand Army of the Republic based on her discharge papers, just like Sarah Evans. 1884, she received her pension, $8 a month. They moved to New York City, where she then promptly got a job as a matron of the New York City Park Department headquarters. She did that for 10 years, and then in 1905, she became the custodian of the Jamal Mansion. And 1913 is when she actually was speaking with the New York Times reporter about her accounts and memories of the Civil War. The document you're looking at now is the document that they had for her on file to get her pension. And the last Union person that we have is extremely well known. She was Jenny Irene Hodges. She was Union. And her quote is really, "Lots of boys enlisted under the wrong name. So did I. The country needed men, and I wanted excitement. I worked on an Illinois farm as a man the year before the war. I wasn't discovered, and I thought I would try my luck in the service." We do not have any pictures of when she was Jenny. She was born Christmas Day, 1843, in Clogherhead, Ireland. She was an Irish immigrant who held domestic positions. She was 5'3" tall, again, auburn hair, light eyes, complexion, with a very small build. She arrived in New York alone at the age of 16. But prior to the war, she took on the male identity and worked as a laborer. After the war, she was very proud of her status and wore the uniform every day. Her reasons for enlistment was, as a male, she could vote. She got better paying jobs, and her illiteracy wasn't a challenge. She did receive a pension, and she got the respect from the community. The picture on the left is Albert in his soldier's uniform, and the one on the right is near the end of his life. He enlisted August 6th of 1862 as Private Albert D. Cashier, 95th Illinois Infantry, involved in over 40 engagements, enlisted for 3 years and survived the 3 years. He was also identified as the shortest soldier in the regiment. He was of the Army of the Tennessee engagements. Now, he was in so many engagements. I only put some of the top ones here, but he was in the Siege of Vicksburg, Battle of Nashville. Also, he was at the Red River Campaign, same as Sarah Wakeman. Battle of Kennesaw Mountain and Jonesboro, Georgia. There is an account on file where he was captured for a short period of time, but escaped by overpowering the guard. Albert actually mustered out August of 1865. His unit actually lost 289 soldiers to death and disease. The picture on the left is the Battle of, or the Siege of Vicksburg. Post-war for Albert, received a military pension of $13 and held several different positions, was a farmhand, church janitor, cemetery worker, street lamplighter. Became the officer of the Guard Post 486, served briefly as a sergeant major. Albert voted, and his secret had been discovered twice, but never divulged. November 10th, 1910, he was hit by a car and broke his leg. He actually was sent to the soldiers and sailors' home. The document on the left is his actual pension application, which he received the 13 for, and the document below is the piece of paper that they used to show he left the post to live in the state soldier's home. The secret was safe at that time. March 1913, due to showing signs of Alzheimer's, he was sent to the Watertown State Hospital. It was at the Watertown State Hospital. His gender was disclosed somehow to the public, and after much ado, there had been a very negative impact on Cashier. Now, once we get into the Confederates, we don't have as good as documentation as we did with the Union, but we do have some. And Loretta Janetta Velasquez, she said, I plunged into an adventure for the love of the thing. The lady in the black and white in the picture is Loretta Janetta. She was born in Havana, Cuba, June 26, 1842. Now, she was born into a military family, but she was sent to study in New Orleans. And she eloped with another U.S. military man to get away from an arranged marriage. She saw this as independence. Her characteristics, she was restless, she was self-reliant, impulsive, impatient, and honest. She convinced her husband at the time to join the Confederacy, and she viewed Army life as a thrilling adventure, and it stoked her sense of adventure. Her reasons for enlisting were pretty much very simple. She had had 3 children die in infancy, and she was looking to spark her desire again for glory. So she was looking for glory and independence. She disguised herself, awarded herself a rank of lieutenant, ordered 2 Confederate uniforms, recruited 236 men from Arkansas as cavalry. She then marched them to Pensacola and presented them to her husband. He was very surprised. After her first husband died, she became an independent soldier and joined with another regiment for the engagement of Battle of Bull Run. Harry T. Buford is her name that she was enlisted in. And the facial hair that you see here, the mustache and the goatee, this was all made out of Janetta's own hair. Her engagements were the Battle of Bull Run as 1st Manassas, Blackburn's Ford, Battle of Ball's Bluff, where at that time she watched and was very, very unhappy with the treatment by the Confederate soldiers to the Union. She lost that shine that she had for the enterprise of war. So she decided that she was going to become a spy. So she took her own name back, she took her female gender back, and she tried to be a spy, but she found that didn't give her the spectacular feelings that she wanted. So she reactivated Harry T. Buford. She traveled to the Battle of Fort Donelson. She was actually injured in her foot multiple times, and fearing she was going to be found out, she started to go back to New Orleans. But in the interim, she hooked up with her original regiment from Arkansas, and she went to the Battle of Shiloh. It was at the Battle of Shiloh where she was actually wounded in the side with an exploding shell. Her gender was discovered, and she was treated at the Empire Hotel Hospital. The picture to the left happens to be Ball's Bluff, which was almost like a massacre. Now, for post-war, she actually relocated to Texas. She got married a couple of times and had a child. She also wrote a book, and she published her autobiography. It's called The Woman in Battle. She did serve under Jubal Early, and after he read the book, he wholeheartedly believed that the woman in battle grievously injured the character and the fame of the Confederate armies and of the people of the South, especially the women of the South. Yet there was 40 to 50 members of Congress that supported her, and Brigadier General George Anderson vouched for her from Atlanta. She did tell reporters that she wrote the book to be able to support herself and her child. There is a lot of, today, there's a lot of historians really having major discussions on the book and some of the validity of the book. The next person is Mary Ann Clark. Mary Ann Clark, her mother said, quoted, "She became despondent and declared her intention of leaving the county forever." She was born around 1831 in Breckinridge County, Kentucky. We have no known physical or personal attributes. We have no known pictures. We do know a little bit about why she enlisted. She was married in 1850s. She had an abusive, irresponsible husband who abandoned her and her children, and she had lost two children previous to that. We have no picture of her as her recruitment, Henry Clark, but she did enlist in 1861 as Private Henry Clark in Cavalry Company. It lasted until February of 1862 when she mustered out and returned home. There was a family tragedy in May. There was the death of her brother-in-law. And what happened was her brother-in-law was murdered by pro-union mob. She then left her daughter in a convent. Actually, she left her daughter and son in a convent and in the care of the priest. I believe the daughter ended up in St. Vincent's Asylum. She found that the military was a place of refuge for people with troubled souls and turmoil. This is the Battle of Kentucky. She re-enlisted in June of 1862 after her brother-in-law was murdered under General Braxton Bragg. She was in the Confederate Army Campaign of Tennessee and Kentucky. She rose in the rank to lieutenant. 1862, the Battle of Richmond. She was wounded in the thigh, a considerable piece above the knee. 1862, she was captured and held many different places and finally ended up in Cairo. Now, in Cairo, they didn't have a prison for people. What they did do is they had a place called Fort Defiance, and that's where they would house people. It was there that the guards actually detected she was a woman and treated her like a lady. She also stated she wanted to stay with her comrades. She was given a dress and paroled, and she promised to go visit friends in Vicksburg. And what actually did happen is the last we know about Mary is she was writing a letter home to her mother, and she actually reached out to some of her friends to send, she actually gave the letter to her friends and asked that they deliver the letter to her mother. She said that every time she started to write a letter directly to her mother, she would end up crying. So she tells her friends in this letter where she is and that here is the letter. She asks them to do a favor. I wish for you to write to Mrs. E.A.W. Burbage for me and tell her all you know about me, where I was when I was taken prisoner. I was a good rebel soldier. I have been. She lives near Hardinsburg, Breckinridge County, and told her about getting wounded and the detection. Told her where her daughter was, where her son was. Tell her I never expect to see her again, as I may get killed in battle. There is a battle impending in Vicksburg, and I expect it to be in it. Our officers here tell me they will exchange me for a man. And then she thanks them gratefully for delivering that letter. And that is the last time anybody actually heard from Mary Ann Clark. And the last two we have happen to be cousins. And it's Mary Bell, aka Bob Morgan, and Molly Bell, aka Tom Parker. And Molly actually stated, if all the women of the Confederacy were as patriotic as they, the country would have been free long ago. They were born. The dates of the births and dates of deaths are not known in precise time. It appears that Mary was born November 21st, 1847 or 1849. Molly's date of birth is totally unknown. They were both living on a farm with an uncle in Pulaski County in West Virginia. These two women were thought to be cousins. They grew up in the Southwest Virginia rural country. They lived in farming country. They rode horseback. They farmed and were in very good health. Molly had an education and was a little bit more refined. She was known for her boldness, as you can tell from the quote. Molly was passionate and impulsive, while Mary was a little quiet and reserved and could be taciturn and moody, modest and backwards. They had one reason for enlistment. Their uncle was a pro-union person and decided to fight for the union. And they were so patriotic and infuriated with their uncle that they enlisted in the Confederacy to get revenge. This is the only picture we do have of Mary, approximately 17 years old when she was in uniform. We do not have any pictures of Molly at all. They actually enlisted in 1862, private cavalry and infantry. They served for 2 years under General Jubal Early in the Shenandoah Valley. Battle of Chancellorsville, that's the picture, Battle of Gettysburg, Battle of Spotsylvania Courthouse. Molly was actually wounded, but in fear of being found out, she only let Mary tend to the wound. So during the 2 years that Mary and Molly were under Jubal Early, they were promoted sergeant and corporal respectfully. October 19th, 1864, they had confided in a captain about who they were and what they were doing, and he held their secret, but he got captured. They told another officer, thinking he would hold the secret. He did not. Within 48 hours, he alerted Early regarding their gender. They were immediately detained and sent to Castle Thunder Prison, which you see here. Now, any of these people that were detained, there was no charges ever levied because they never wrote a law that they were breaking. Jubal Early did not take into account when they were discovered that they had been promoted within their military career. They had been commended for their skills and their dedication to the cause. They were known to their comrades as gallant first-class fighting men. And Edmund Ruffin thought that they proved themselves to be fine soldiers and should be allowed to stay in service. Post-war, we know a little bit about Mary Bell. April 4th, 1869, she married Jonathan Looker and she relocated to Illinois and had 3 children. Post-war, we know nothing about Molly. Where are they now? Well, Sarah died in Texas, 1898. Sarah Rosetta Wakeman died in Louisiana, 1864. Albert D.J. Cashier died 1915 in Illinois. Katie Brownell died 1915 in Shenandoah County, New York. The Confederate side, we know that Loretta Janetta, her date of death is in dispute by the historians. Some people think that she possibly died 1897. Some believe 1923. Mary Ann Clark, date and location unknown. Mary Bell passed March 23rd, 1939, Virginia, Illinois. Molly Bell, date and location unknown. So as I start to wrap it up and let you know where they really are, Sarah passed from malingering complications of the malaria that she contracted, and she died in LaPorte, Texas. This is her original gravestone in Washington Cemetery, and this is the monument that they dedicated to her. She was interred with full military honors at Washington Cemetery in Houston, Texas. In 1998, she was inducted in the U.S. Military Hall of Fame. She is also a member of the state of Michigan and New Brunswick's Hall of Fame, and I think that is phenomenal. Sarah Rosetta Wakeman, she died from contracting dysentery in the Red River Campaign. This is her original tombstone, as she was actually interred in the cemetery, Chalmette National Cemetery, as Private Lyon Lyons Wakeman. And in 1976, items found in an attic, a packet of letters, a ring, and a picture. They put everything together, and it's in the book, An Uncommon Soldier. And that's how we know a little bit more about Sarah. Jenny Irene Hodges, she died from an infection from the broken hip. When she went into the state hospital and it was discovered she was a female, they made her go back to being a female, dress in female clothes, and wear female shoes. She was unsteady on her feet. She fell down a flight of stairs. She broke her hip and subsequently got an infection from that fall, and she died from the infection. There's her original tombstone and the new tombstone. Some of her comrades were responsible for getting those tombstones. This picture here was her her post-war residence, but it was decaying, so some volunteers got money together so that they could save it. And then Livingston County War Museum usually only goes from World War I forward, but because Albert D. Cashier was from there, they've dedicated a whole part in the museum to him. And Katie Burnell, she died in 1915 in Oxford County. This is her monument dedicated to her. And this is her tombstone. She is buried in the North Burial Ground from Providence, Rhode Island. And interesting to note, Robert, her husband, had her buried with his first wife because he didn't have enough money for a second burial plot, nor when Robert did die, did he have enough money to be buried with her. Loretta Janetta Velasquez, the date of death is in dispute, but we do know she relocated to a mining town in Austin, Nevada. She remarried, and she died a widow. Her original gravestone was in this Calvary Cemetery, but the actual location has been lost to time with deterioration of her wooden marker and the recycling of graves. Mary Ann Clark, aka Henry Clark, past date and location totally unknown. Mary Bell, we know that she died 1939 in Virginia, Illinois. The paper on the left happens to be her wedding license, the license by which she needed to get married to Mr. Looker. And there's her tombstone at the Walnut Ridge Cemetery in Virginia, Illinois. And Molly, date and location unknown. And so we now actually are coming to the end of this whole presentation as I've put it forward. And I'm putting out my last slide to everybody. Happens to be a sketch from Alfred R. Ward, who was one of the famous sketch artists of the Civil War. Happens to be the 2nd Connecticut Regiment, but it could be any regiment on either side. That's what it would have looked like, whether it was men or women. And then the map underneath happens to be where some of these battles took place and where some of these women lived. And as I put this all together, I realized that we had amazing amount of whispers coming from these women of who they were and why they joined the Civil War and what happened to them. And they really fascinated me. And I don't think there's enough part of history being discussed or even spoken about. So I was trying to bring some of this to light for us today. And I think about the whole piece of the Civil War and what it represents. And I'm looking at the historical significance about what these women, anywhere between 4 and 1,000, did. And when I think about it is the women soldiers of the Civil War merit recognition because they were they were there and they were not supposed to be. And that is a quote from Deanne Blanton. And she is the woman that works in the National Archives. And it's her book that really spurred me on. And here's her book right here. And the other book that I talked about is Uncommon Valor. I hope you guys can see it. Both of these books are really phenomenal books and tell us a lot about these women, where they were coming from, and why they did what they did. So I would just like to say thank you very much for coming and joining and listening to the profiles of these women who were the women soldiers of the Civil War. Thank you.